Good morning, church.
Morning. Good morning.
How was everybody this morning?
Fantastic.
Looks like we got the few and the proud this morning. We're low on people. Mary's working. Dave is still sick, I take it. A few of the other ones had called and let me know. So I know that there's some people out there got some things to do today, but same God is here as always.
Amen.
We come to praise the Lord and we come to learn. You gonna teach us something this morning? So I look forward to the class this morning. For those that are here, I will tell you that Sister Christy has officially resigned her position as Sunday school teacher out of purely not having a ride to church. She realizes that that can't be, and she doesn't want to have to go back and forth. She's kind of heartbroken over the fact that she can't be here to do it because she loves teaching those kids. So I will say this, and I'm going to repeat it again since we've got 1/3 of our people here this morning. We are looking for the volunteer that wants to take over that. It's not good to not have a Sunday school class for kids. And I'll say this too, I'm not looking for the person to tell me why they can't do it. I'm looking for the person that tells me that they can and wants to. When we ask and talk about volunteers for stuff, or we ask for fundraising things, sometimes we hear the people who are saying why they can't do it, and that's not really, what we need to hear. We're looking for the person who says they can. So if it's been on your heart, or you're thinking about it now that Christy is not doing that position anymore, then please let me know. It doesn't have to be today. If you want to pray on it, go ahead and do that. But as a church, we need to have somebody that wants to do that. I'm sure there's somebody out there. Understand that, that's a commitment, just like Christy was saying that she can't do it anymore. That doesn't mean that if every once in a while something comes up, a person has to work or something like that, that we can't. What I want you to do is I want you to work with that. Talk to somebody else that might be your fill-in. I don't mind doing it whenever somebody has something that is unusual on a Sunday. So don't let yourself not commit yourself, because you know that every now and then you might not be here. Now, if you're not going to be here every other week, then you're not really committed to it. So I just wanted to let that know during Sunday school class, because that is a Sunday school ministry, and it's very important. We actually need more than one. We need to grow some more so we can get a couple of them, so we can separate those ages a little bit more too. So I'll leave that out there with you. Spread it to the other people that you talk to from the church. Encourage somebody if you know somebody has thought about it, done it before, or that you think will be good at it. Let them know. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Brother Mike.
If I may just piggyback on you for 1 second about that. This is how I feel about the Sunday school thing. We all, I guess, at the forefront of what we do should be looking for a church that's alive with the Spirit, that we're comfortable in, and that is along our belief system. But one of the reasons that I came, that really motivated me to come here, besides Randy being my best friend and starting off with church being small and everything, wanting to come down and help him, was because I was in Canaan, which is 300-400 people, and I never saw that I was going to be able to grow anywhere in that church. I mean, they have volunteers and they have teachers and they got their superintendent. They've got it all going on up there. They've got the whole classrooms for different grade levels and all of that. And so a part of coming here was that I saw that that I had an opportunity to do something for God. Now I'm not about to talk about stealing folks, but if you know somebody who's looking for a church that's alive, they're in, but they want to do something more for the Lord, you might want to talk to them about coming to this church because there's opportunity for growth here. I'm not trying to be mean, or steal people from other churches, but we believe that God is here, but there may be a person in a much bigger church who is feeling like compelled they want to do something for God, but there's no room for them in that church because people are set in their ways. They already have the people doing things. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility because there's a whole bunch of people in bigger congregations that feel like they want to serve the Lord in some way, shape, or form, but they're not going to be able to do that just because of massive numbers. That's how I felt. It was something that I thought about when I left Canaan to come here. Was it made me happy because I was like, I'm going to have an opportunity to do something that I feel like I should be doing. Because it wasn't going to happen there. And it's no knock against Canaan. Canaan's a great church, and it's alive. And I love everybody up there. I still go there on Wednesday nights. They're great people. I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying. So I threw that out there. So we were talking last week in chapter 4 about Cain and Abel's offering, and we talked about the difference between Abel's offering and Cain's offering, and the fact that Abel's heart was in the right place, and that he offered his first fruits. On top of that, he had the best choice to offer to God as a sin offering, and Cain didn't. Cain's offering didn't come from the heart, and he was doing it, basically going through the motions, doing it because he felt like he had to, and he did exactly what he was supposed to do and nothing more, nothing less. And it's just his heart wasn't in it. And so then God found favor in Abel's offering and then not Cain's offering. And then we started to talk about Cain's response to that and how we saw God warning Cain about what was going on in his heart, because God knew what Cain was thinking and he knew what Cain was feeling, and pretty much reminded him that, my blessings upon you are a direct result of your behavior. Is it not true that if you did well, I would bless you well? It's not your brother's fault. It's your fault that you didn't do what you were supposed to do. And instead of taking responsibility for that, Cain wanted to blame his brother and take it out on his brother. And then we come to where we are in verse 8, where we're about to see the first act of murder in the Bible. Any questions about last week or anything that we did last week before we go on? So, verse 8, and Cain talked with Abel, his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field that Cain rose up against Abel, his brother, and slew him. Now, the word study here, brother, we visited most of these words already, but brother is ach, and it means brother of same parents, or a half-brother of the same father, a relative, a kinship, or if you come from the same tribe. We call each other brothers and sisters because we're in the family of God. So when you see the kinship there or the same tribe, you can get the idea. Slew is harang, and it means to kill, slay, murder, destroy, or murderer. So there are some things here that, as I read, there's a lot of different versions, if you will, of the Hebrew text. Correct, Mr. Theologian? Okay. You have a Samaritan text. You have what are called Chaldee Targums. Am I pronouncing that right?
The last part, sure. The first part here is good.
All right, Chaldee Targums. You have the Vulgate, and the Syriac. There's just a number of versions of the original Hebrew text. And so when it says, and Cain talked with Abel, his brother, one of the things, I don't know, that I have read, is that there's a little mark in the margin of most writings because there seems to be a deficiency in the verse, in that it says it talked with Abel, but what the other verse is saying is that let's go out into the field. He basically, and he didn't go and have a conversation with him about how his feelings were. Whereas if I sat there and told you, there's something going on, you guys know there's something going on, and I said, well, I talked to Randy about it, you would get the idea that me and Randy sat down and had a conversation about that. What we're getting here is that Cain pretty much went over to Abel, invited him to come outside. So he said, let's go on down to the field for a minute, and Abel, not really understanding what's going on, he insinuates that perhaps this happened in the morning. Abel's waking up, he's with his family or whatever, and Cain wants to take this action, but he doesn't want to do it in front of anybody. He wants to do it in private. And so premeditated is the word I'm thinking of. He has thought this out, and even though God has just got done warning him about his jealousy and his envy towards the favor that Abel got from God, he decides that he's going to go and invite his brother out to the field. And so, because there's no indication of time, it is possible, that a night had passed since the conversation with God, and that Cain's anger had stewed, and he had sat there and just continued to get more and more angry. I mean, I think we've all experienced something in our lives where we were angry, and the more time that went on, we just got more angry about it until we decided to blow up about something. Instead of praying over it or doing something that was right about it, something correct, maybe biggest thing, looking at ourselves and fixing something here instead of out there, but which is what Cain would have had to have done. Cain would have had a little introspection with himself and realized that it was his fault, like God was saying, to relieve some of his anger. But Cain was not about to accept that responsibility. He wasn't about to step in front of the mirror and look at himself. So something is possible that over the night he said, how'd you sleep that night? When you sit there and you had something that was weighing on your mind, did you sleep well? I don't know about you, but for me, when I'm angry about something, I can't sleep. I just lay there and stare at the ceiling until I have to do something about it. I have to say something about it. And once it gets to a certain point, that you might as well forget it. I'm up all night. So I can envision Cain with this story. I can see him up, pacing, walking, getting more and more angry. How dare he? Everything is about Abel, and it's all Abel's fault. To where he's worked himself up so well in the morning time that he's like, hey, come on down to the field. Let's go take a walk. Abel, not even really knowing, probably not even suspecting that anything is going to be coming. He's had his conversation with God. He found his favor with God. From the accounts that we know, and we don't know very much about Abel, we do know that he was with, he worshiped God. He was on the right path. He was doing what he was supposed to be doing. So he got up when his brother came to him, and they went to the field. Then we see that Cain then slew his brother. Probably, we don't know. I mean, he was an agriculturalist, so he had a number of tools how to do it. And he took him down to the field where he may have had the tools. So nobody knows how he did it. We just know that blood was drawn, as we're going to read in the next verse. So he took his brother out and he killed him. So then we go to verse 9 and we say, and the Lord said unto Cain, that was good. And the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And have you noticed, so far we're reading, it's always Abel thy brother. Repeatedly he's reading, thy brother, thy brother, thy brother. There's an importance in that relationship that God is sitting here, where is thy brother? And it's really going to come to a head, not in this verse, but in verse 10. And I think is where we're going to see the importance of this. But he goes, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, oh, actually, it's right here. And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? Now, if he was talking to Mike back, and my first immediate answer would have been, guess what? Yes, without question, we are our brother's keeper. We are our brothers and our sister's keeper. Randy's known me for a long time. I've been saying that forever and a day. Yes, we are our brother's keeper. When our brother is down, we're supposed to be there to pick him up.
Amen.
I don't care if you're wrong. I'm still going to pick you up. And then when you get up and dust yourself off, then I'm going to tell you how wrong you are. But I'm going to pick you up. We are our brother's keeper. I'm going to love you first, and then I'm going to correct you. And I would hope that my brothers would do this very same thing to me. Because the last thing I want is for you to sit there and love me so much that you let me mess up. Don't do that to Mike. Mike would much rather you just say, hey, buddy, I don't think so. Go ahead.
You've heard me say before, I don't know if I've ever mentioned it here, but one of the things, or the reasons why I felt called to be a preacher was that even whenever I was clearly wronged by somebody, and sometimes bad wrong, I could have an immediate reaction of anger with them, but I could not hold that. I would actually feel the need to help them because that was what was inside of me. And I used to think all the time that that was one of those things that was a calling for a preacher. And I thought about that over a time frame and knowing that we were going to be hitting this part. Really, that's just the call of being a Christian. It's not about being a preacher. It's a good attribute for a preacher to have. But really, a Christian himself you should feel like you want to be your brother's keeper. Something's wrong, even when somebody wrongs you. If you don't feel, like I said, your initial reaction can be what it is. Doesn't make it right, but that's the human. That's the sin side of us doing things. But if you don't feel like going and apologizing, you don't feel like going to pick them back up from where you knocked them down to, something is not right there.
One of the things about Randy that I've always liked and I've always admired ever since like we first met each other and started when we were working together, there's nothing ever really seemed to rattle him. I mean, we were working at the detention center and I would get angry. You know, I was not a nice guy. I had a temper from nowhere, or from everywhere, however you want to look at it. But anytime I would be angry, I'd be looking over at him, and he's just sitting there. And I'm like, aren't you angry? And then I would get one of these things, and then that would make me angry. Is that, you know, he's just sitting there going like this. It's whatever, you know. He's always been very calm, and that's something that I've always wished. It's one of the things that I liked about him. So. And I had a friend once that told me, if you are the top dog in all of your cliques, then you'll never grow. And so I always surrounded that. Somebody told me that a long time ago, and I figured, you know, I don't want to be the smartest guy in my clique, and I don't want to, you know, be the guy that's got everything going on in my clique. I want to surround myself with people who are better than me, so that I can watch them and emulate them, and you know, and I can grow. And so one of the things that drew me to him is because I was like, I want to see how this guy can sit there. These kids are spitting on us and calling us names and, you know, just everything under the sun. And this guy's just walking around like it's 65 and sunny outside, you know. So that's one of the things that always drew me to Randy. So, moving on. We're done with the Randy. Minute. Okay. Verse 9, and the Lord said unto Cain, where is Abel thy brother? And he said, I know not. Am I my brother's keeper? Keeper is shamar, and it means to keep, guard, observe, give heed, and all of those. And basically that's the only one we need to, because we've pretty much gone on all the other words. And so we just see a few verses ago where God warned Cable about the envy and the hate. And we saw that he did not heed those warnings. So God knew what was about to happen. And even though he asks the question, we should revert back to when he asked Adam what was going on. God already knew. You're not going to get away from this. Here is an opportunity for you, Cain, to confess what you're doing. Cain blew it, just like mom and dad blew it. Okay? God already knew where Abel was, and God knows what has happened. And so this is the second time now where God has given man the opportunity to confess his sin, and man has let that opportunity pass by. First, we saw all the blame shifting that was going on when he was talking to Adam and Eve. And then here, Cain's just flat out saying, it's not my responsibility to know where he is. Am I my brother's keeper? Cain is asking, am I his guardian? Am I his protector? And am I possibly, you can say, am I his savior? As the word does mean to save a life. So he's not happy with God already. Because he's already got contempt in his heart. His heart is not pure. His heart is filled with anger and frustration and strife. So he's already he's not a happy guy. All right? So he comes and gets questioned by God, and he's probably going with a very cocky tone, am I my brother's keeper? I don't know where he is. How many, in our own ways, one of the kids, they come in and say, where's mom? I don't know. It wasn't my turn to watch her. We say those are the things we kind of say. I get frustrated because we're all in the same house, and you come to me and say, where's mom? I don't know, did you check any of the other few rooms that are here? I mean, we're confined into a house. Go find her. Yeah.
Did you ever wonder whether or not Cain and Abel knew what their parents had done?
I think, but I think because of the offerings that just took place, I think that Adam and Eve took time to teach them about everything. And I think that once Adam and Eve fell, God took the time to teach them on how to give repentful sacrifices. And then I think as a practice, that Adam and Eve taught the children how to do the same. Because the man had fallen. This is upon you now too.
The reason I asked that question is I was watching the other day, they have that show where they do like we used to do every now and then, where they bring the kids into the jail, the Scared Straight program. And
I was good at that.
We know this from being in the jobs we had before, but what I was going to say is, I think this is a good example here, right at the beginning again, like there's so many foundations as you've been showing here. The example of how, as a parent, how important it is that you lead by example, because I think that at some point, just like, I don't know how old Cain and Abel are here, but I'm assuming that they're either young adults or close to it, and at some point, you learn things about your parents. I started learning things that my dad did that I didn't know when I was 8 years old. That in some aspect, I've said this before, my fault, because I'm responsible for myself, but some of the things I did in my early adulthood were because of the things I saw my dad and my uncles doing that seemed to be okay, because these are the people you look up to. So I wondered if they've seen this, and Abel got a little bit more. He learned from his mother's mistakes, or in his dad's mistakes, but did I say Cain or did I say Abel? Abel learned. Mm-hmm. But Cain may have learned the opposite, meaning that he heard the whole story about what they did and how they didn't listen to God, and well, if Dad did it, I can be just like Dad, and so on, and it's just another example.
Well, don't we experience that now? I mean, we have people that are in this church that have raised their kids in the church, and now when their kids have become grown and on their own, they're not here. So it's the same thing, really.
They looked. See, that's the thing. It's still on them as adults.
Yes.
They look and see, well, Dad was out of church for 15 years, so I could probably do this too, and come back to the Lord whenever I.
And I'm quite certain that
another perfect example of how important it is as parents.
And how the book of Genesis can come alive in 2013.
Yeah.
Because
we looked at Genesis. Before you started this, many people looked at Genesis and said, yeah, that's the beginning. God created everything, and Cain slew his brother, and a couple other things happened.
There's the
But
flood.
to look at all of the underlying foundations, is the word you keep using, that are there. This is why you don't just take the Bible and just read it through like it's a novel. The way he's teaching Sunday school class, and we talk about this many times, about going back and looking at the words, seeing what they mean. Look how much more we've learned in 3 or 4 chapters that you probably never really would have done if this isn't how you're being taught. There's your,
Thanks.
we're even now.
Young lady, 44.
Should put oneself up in his shirt.
All right.
It's me and Nessa's turn.
Is it okay?
But I'm thinking as you're talking about this, in the same breath, that I have always been one, I'm a parent, and I don't take glory over when my kids do well. And I also do not take responsibility when they do not do well. I don't do either. I allow them to reap rewards and reap consequences themselves. I've seen too many good Christian families, do everything right
Yeah.
by the book and have one, what they call a black sheep of the family, go wrong. But ultimately, it's that foundation that you start with. You do everything that you should do as a parent, and I've seen, by the grace of God, they come back. They're lost and they come back because they had a good foundation to start with.
Kathy and I just had this conversation yesterday about kids that we know and how they were raised, and how some of them didn't have good guidance, turned out to be great kids.
Yeah.
And then the opposite as well. The
Yeah.
kids were raised in good homes, raised
Yeah.
right, and how they just,
Yeah.
Some notorious
Well,
killers have been raised in great homes and they've turned out
Right.
awful.
One of these days when we have time, I have this philosophy about stress, and that there is no such thing as stress. And basically because I refuse to own other people's garbage, because that's where the bulk of our stress comes from, believe it or not, is owning other people's garbage. And so me and my wife are having some conversations about some behaviors of the children in our house lately. And I don't know if it's owning the responsibility of their bad behavior as much as it is before we look at them and chastise them for, it's okay, what example are we providing? And so we realized that we weren't providing the best example, so we've made some changes so that we feel like we're in step with the Lord and His expectations of us as parents. But at the end of the day, we're still having the one-on-one meetings saying, yeah, we're not happy with your conduct and you need to make some changes about this. So I agree. I wouldn't own their bad conduct or the good, because you have to have praise just as well as you have to have correction. Otherwise, if it's just all correction, what's the point? They're going to start asking some very heavy questions. If I can't do anything right, then why should I do anything at all? So you have to have both. And then when they get to a certain age, and just like Cain right here, they had the same parents. They were receiving, most likely they were receiving the same lessons. One heard it, the other didn't. And actually he heard it because he was doing it, he just didn't put his heart into it. He was, because what Randy says, we're not really sure how old they were. In some of the commentaries that I've read, and going into the next few verses, there's a lot of mathematical calculations going on as far as roundabout ages. The fact, we're going to get into it later, but the fact that, for an example, that when Cain got banished, goes into the one verse that him and his wife, he knew his wife and they had a child. Well, the fact that after his banishment, if he would have gotten married after his banishment, when the earth was to rebuke him, that would have been some major news. You mean to tell me that a woman, after you have had the mark of God put on you, that a woman found you favorable in her eyes? I mean, that would have been a story. So the fact that he knew his wife and had a kid kind of means that somewhere along before this happened, he was already married. Because it wasn't no news at all. So he was already married. So now when you're sitting there talking about the ages, what, 17, 18 maybe? I mean, he has his field, he's married, maybe 16, the youngest. You know, we know his brother Abel was a little younger than him. But then again, when we go into talking about how God heard his blood crying, which is in the next verse or so, we can talk about people's interpretations of that as well, which kind of indicates that he was married and he had children. Perhaps. It's all dependent on how you want to interpret it. So we are talking about, you know, maybe late teens. I wouldn't go too far into the 20s, 20, 21 maybe. Because we also know in this time and age, day and age, everything happened very young. Men and women were married young. Babies started coming as soon as women were able to have babies. They started having them, which is why it's kind of unfathomable to us. Because sometimes now, you know, women are waiting until they're in their 30s to get married and have kids, as compared to 13, 14, 15 years old back in the day. So how did the earth get so populated? Well, if you only had to wait 13 years or 14 years to start populating, it could happen pretty fast. And there's a mathematical for that, which I actually included into this because I thought of you, Dennis, about, you know, I don't know why. I was just thinking about you when I said, I'm going to put this in here because I know Dennis might find this interesting. So, so we also, before we move on off this slide, can you see how even now his heart still isn't right? You can see the attitude. Am I my brother's keeper? There's probably some sarcasm in his voice. And the heart, his heart is just not right. You know, and unfortunately, sometimes as much teaching as a parent can do, you can't change somebody's heart. One of the things that me and Randy are working with those kids is we can talk to, we're blue in the face. And sometimes it's just not going to work. And then with my wife working at the sheriff's department, I'm still seeing a lot of the kids that we had still messing up, still going to prison. They graduated. You know, detention center, county jail, now they're going to prison. And they're still being idiots. You know, they haven't had a change of heart at all, and sometimes people die, they just don't have a change of heart. And they, you know, I wish everybody would go to heaven, and if that's the case, we can stop worrying about them because we know one day they're going to have a change of heart. But what causes us to worry about them is that we know that not everybody has a change of heart. So, and it's that attitude in the heart that is that got Cain into the trouble that he's in. It's what has him getting smart and snippy with God here. And again, he's forgetting. If his mom and dad taught him lessons, he's forgetting the one where they say God already knows the answers to the questions, so just be honest. And apparently he called in sick on that day. And he said, "What hast thou done? Thy voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground." Now, there's a rule, and I'm just going to get past this. Anybody who doesn't know, in dealing with pronouns, is that he, she, them, her, him, all of them refer to the closest object, which would have been Cain, because Cain was the one who was talking. But this is God talking now. This isn't Cain continuing on with this conversation. God is asking him, "What hast thou done?" Voice is kol, and it means voice, sound, or noise. Blood is dam, and it means blood, or figuratively it's been used as to say of wine. And crieth is zahak, and it means to cry out, to call, cry for help. So this is the same root words that God used in talking to Eve in chapter 3 and verse 13 when he said, "What hast thou done?" And if you recall, when we were talking about that, we kind of thought that this was a significant question for Eve. Is we all know what you did, but do you really know what you did? We knew what the actions were, but do you really know the consequences of what you just did? Do you really know what you just did? We all know that Cain slew his brother. Abel is dead. But does Cain really know what he just did? For the rest of his life, for the rest of his children's generations, for the rest of the world, does he really know what he just did? God, I don't believe, was asking that question because he didn't know. Because again, God knew. But again, he's asking. I don't think Cain was thinking very clearly here and wondering if he knew what he just did. So, for Eve, it was the first sin. And for Cain, we now see the first act of jealousy, envy. We see the first act of hatred. In this, the first murder on the planet. So we have very early on an example of hate that we're going to see throughout the rest of the Bible and how much it destroys man. And that's where, do you know what you just did? Your hatred for your brother, which caused you to kill him, has destroyed you. In this particular moment, we don't know because we're taking this slowly, but in the next verses, we're going to see how Cain just destroyed himself and his family. His wife. We know that he's married. Well, we believe very strongly that he's married now, but what you just did affected your wife and your lineage. So he asks that question. Now, we see the voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. We see that the voice can mean sound or noise, and blood is blood, and crieth means to call out. There are several interpretations of what this means. This could be interpreted as that his wife he did have children, and they're there with the body, and they're crying out, and God can hear them crying. Or that God is not only that he doesn't have children yet, and that his body may not have been found, but he can hear the generations of Abel that will no longer come into existence crying out because you just ended all of that. And then there are people that will say that the meaning is, as it says, in that Abel was a righteous man. For as much as you could be at that moment in time, he did what he did. He did it with a great heart and out of honor and love for the Lord. He did what he did. And that he literally could hear the blood of a righteous person being soaked into the ground because he was slayed by evil. And from that, I found that I had to stop because it's amazing, and that's the version I choose to believe, by the way, because it brings me comfort to know that we go out from this church, and every day during the week we get hits. People take a hit on Christian. I mean, Christianity's getting knocked around pretty good in civilization right now. And in particularly in our country. It's been going on. Christians are getting murdered in other countries. Somehow or another, I kind of feel like this country could get to that sometime soon. But if he can hear the blood of Abel, because there was a special connection between him and him, because Abel worshipped him like we worship God. It brings me comfort to know that, as long as I'm faithful to God and I'm doing what he can hear me. He can hear the pain. He can hear the suffering that people are causing us. We know that the Bible says, hey, heads up, you're going to be persecuted in my name. If you believe in me, this world's going to persecute you. I don't think any of us can look at what they did to Jesus Christ and think that we're going to get treated any better. He was God. He is the Lord. And they did that to him. I'm not the Lord. What is it that they can do to me? The same thing. And we shouldn't think that we're not going to be persecuted just because we're Christians. And so when I sit here and think about the fact that God heard the blood of Abel calling to him from the ground, then he hears me when the world is attacking me. And I believe he hears us. That tells me he hears us. It's very clear. Abel was dead and he's not talking. And God is saying, I still hear you. And so when we sit and pray about things that are going on, it's just comforting to me to know that and believe that God has heard me. So Abel was dead and Cain murdered him. God knew it, and God felt the loss of an obedient child in Abel. I think we can surmise all of that. Verses 11 and 12, and now art thou cursed from the earth, which hath opened her mouth to receive thy brother's blood from thy hand. When thou tillest the ground, it shall not henceforth yield unto thee her strength. A fugitive and a vagabond shalt thou be in the earth. Cursed, we studied earlier when God cursed the snake, but the difference is, here he's cursing Cain. Cain's got some issues that are going to be known to him. Mouth is, the root word is per, and it means mouth of man, or mouth as an organ of speech. Hand is yad, and it means hand. And we studied tillest, and to till the ground when Adam's consequence, when he was told that he was going to have to till the ground after he got banished from Eden. And henceforth is yasaf, and it means to add, to increase, or to do again. Yield is natan, and it means to give, put, set, bestow, and all of those words that are up there. Strength is koach, and it means power or might and strength and produce, wealth of the soil, which is where we're talking about here. That would be the definition relevant to what we're talking about. Fugitive is nuah, and it means to quiver, to shake, reel, stagger, wander, to move, to sift back and forth. And vagabond is nude, and it means to pretty much the same as fugitive, to move to or fro. And I think another one is to lament, condole, or show sympathy, to have compassion. So I think that what he was saying was that when he's using those two words, that fugitive and vagabond, he's pretty much saying that you're going to stay, you're going to wander. You're not going to find a place to settle down. You're going to wander this world, and you're not going to be a happy person. You're going to have this sympathy, and you're going to lament what you've done, and you're going to not be okay with the consequences. You're going to have a miserable existence. So God has now cursed Cain so that the ground will not be kind to him as it was before, because that was his job. God has caused a separation to come between Cain and earth, and here, I ask you, does that sound familiar? When we say that God has caused a separation, He has cursed him, He is kicking him out of his family, He is sending him away from everybody. He's telling him you're going to be a wanderer and you're not going to find comfort anywhere. What does that remind you of? What else? Besides the garden, what else? What is hell? Yeah. Now, he what is it? He's being separated from his family. He's being separated from God's not going to be talking to him. So what is hell? It's a complete separation from God. And so he is being put into a position where he's going to experience hell on earth. That's how I see it. He has his wife and he'll have his children, he ever have any communication with God, because that's what hell is. You're in hell by yourself and you have no communication with God. You are cut off. And we'll talk about the significance of that, because in this next verse, he asks for mercy. In 13 and 14, Cain says unto the Lord, my punishment is greater than I can bear. Behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face shall I be hid. And I shall be a fugitive and a vagabond in the earth, and it shall come to pass that everyone that findeth me shall slay me. Now, this is where I started doing the word study, but I'm thinking to myself, I really want to skip it and go right to talking about his attitude, because we saw this a lot in detention centers too. Punishment is havon, and it means perversity, depravity, iniquity, guilt or punishment for iniquity. Greater is gadol, and it means great, large in magnitude, extent, number, intensity, or loud in sound, older in age. Bear is nasa, and it means to lift up, bear up, carry, take. Drive me out. Same word as in verse 3 in chapter 3:24, when he got driven out of the Garden of Eden, and it is garash, and it means to drive out, expel, cast. So there was some force to this. It wasn't just a please leave. He was forcing him out from amid his family. Hid is katar, and it means to hide, conceal, to hide oneself. Pass is haya, and it means to be, to become, come to pass, exist, it will happen. And slay is harag, and it means to kill, slay, murder, destroy. And so we see that Cain is sitting there thinking, this is too much. The punishment doesn't fit the crime. And this is where I picked up my phone and I texted Randy and I asked him about the death penalty. It's like, this would have been a perfect time for God to strike him down. An eye for an eye. But he didn't. He showed mercy. Just by letting him live. And so, it's funny how the criminal element, because this happens all the time. People will commit the crime. They're not thinking about consequence. I've seen kids come into the detention center, young men or young women. They're not crying. They know what they did. And they're not upset about it. Until they go before the judge. And then the judge says, well, okay, this is what we're going to do. Then they come back crying. Now, I've seen grown men cry. Because now all of a sudden, holy cow, the consequence is here. They're not thinking about it when they do it. But now that it's over, and then have the audacity. How many kids come out and say, will you write a letter for me so that maybe I can bargain, I can get a little... No! You violated somebody's privacy. You violated somebody's trust. You violated somebody's body. Do you really think I'm going to give you a letter to benefit you? But I've been good. It's a detention center. You want to be good, stay out. Cain committed a murder. He killed his brother, and now he thinks this is too much. And then there are those that don't feel anything at all. And then when they come back, it's not their fault. It's our fault. It's the judge's fault. The judge is a bad guy. God's being too hard on me now. The officers are bad because we send reports to the court letting them know that you're bonehead in here too. And so you get another 60 days. Well, they don't like that. He's still at this particular point in time. What I'm pointing out to you, he is still not taking responsibility for what he's done. He is not looking at God and saying, you know what, I deserve that. Yes, sir. He's still crying about it. So he says, behold, thou hast driven me out this day from the face of the earth, and from thy face I shall be hid. Now, what will be the cries and the woes of those who walk upright today and say there is no God? That was a question that I was asking. or say that the Bible is written of men and God is not powerful enough to control their hands, so I don't have to follow it. What will their pleas be when Jesus says, I don't even know you? This is a question that I ask of today. Of the people of today who are not following with the heart that Cain has. Or they are following with the heart that Cain has. Cain is about to experience what being separated from God is about. He's about to experience destitution. He's about to be uncomfortable and painful for the rest of his life. And possibly eternity. He is still alive, so there's always room for him to repent, but he's going to have to change his heart.
Is it safe to say that he lacks a fear of God? He's living life.
Yeah. Well, and we look at, again, what we have to go through in dealing with the criminal element is, those kids come in and they want to put this show on, these young men, I mean, they're 16, 17, some of them are huge. They have no fear of anything. They don't fear the police. They don't fear us. They don't fear the judge. They don't fear the court system. They don't fear prison. They don't fear any of it. Until the reality hits them that you have to deal with me. And the thing is, they just don't want to deal with you. They don't think that you're going, for some reason, they don't think you're going to deal with them. And if they put on this big show and this hard, tough guy act, you'll leave them alone, and that's not going to happen. I mean, am I right or am I wrong? That's how they feel. And the fact is, they go before the judge, and the judge is issuing the consequence. You ain't escaping. And now all of a sudden the tears come.
One of the things to think about too with Cain is that the things that he's about to experience, the punishment that he's being given, he has not seen ever.
Right.
Nobody has seen. Adam and Eve knew what it was like to get kicked out of the garden, but they didn't experience what Cain's about. God didn't still do away with them because it appears that it looks like they went to some kind of repentance, but at least he still was talking with them. Now
Yeah.
Cain is going to, so it's just what you're saying. Sometimes until you've experienced, these kids you talk until they experience you got 60 more days. Do they? Some get it still, and
Yeah.
some still don't. But Cain had not seen any of
Yeah,
this.
and that's a good point, because I have it here too. Let's remember, it's not like he has several metropolises to pick from. I mean, at this point in time, they got banished a little bit to the east of Eden, right? So they have their little community. Where else are they going to go? I mean, it's not like the world is established. There's not cities he can just travel to and pick up like nothing ever happened like today. If I needed to leave Medina, I would leave Medina. I'd go somewhere else. He has to go to wherever. He doesn't know where he's going. The world hasn't been mapped out or even explored or modernized. So that's a fearful thought. And then he thinks about his family. Okay? You're sending me out there on my own without your protection. Somebody's going to kill me. And it's funny because it's the same thing as what I'm talking about. As I was reading this and dealing with these boneheads, they'll commit a crime, but if you were to do the same thing to them, they'd have a fit. They go into a house and they rob a house, but then when I go into your cell and I start taking stuff out of your cell, you want to yell at me? You've lost your mind. Now he's committed murder, but all of a sudden he's worried about being murdered. Really? And this is the part that I was thinking about you, brother. I was just going to read this. Adam Clark adds this commentary on the probability of how many people are on the planet at this time. Going off the information that Seth was born to Adam and Eve after the death of Abel, and at the time Adam was 130 years old. So there are some numbers. This is his commentary. Let it be observed that the death of Abel took place in the 128 or 129 year of the world. Now, supposing Adam and Eve to have had no other sons than Cain and Abel, in the year of the world 128, yet as they had daughters married to these sons, their descendants would make a considerable figure on the earth, Supposing them to have been married in the 19th year of the world, they might easily have had 8 children each, some males and some females, by the 25th year. In the 50th year, there might proceed from them a direct line of 64 persons. In the 74th year, there would be 512. In the 98th year, there would be 4,096. And in the 122nd, they would amount to 32,768. Now, I figured out that he's multiplying by 8. Every generation that goes by, he multiplies by 8. So that's how he's getting that number. Okay? And every figure that he gives is a block. Every block of the years is 24 years. If you notice, in the years, it's 24. So every 24 years, the population grows exponentially by a power of 8. So by those blocks, he's looking at a population of 32,000 people that are descendants of Adam and Eve. And so there's 32,000 people in the world, roughly, that would be trying to kill Cain because you just killed Abel, who was probably beloved. So he's worried about being sought and found out. So that's a genuine concern, I guess. Is there any questions? It's 2 minutes till, so we want to try to get back in here before 11:30. They put a little twist on it this time.
You still got to laugh, right?
Yes, I
Can't
do.
stop.
Can't stop. All right.
All right, let's go ahead and take our break and get back in for service.
Here's a quarter.
And you want-
Sat there in a little country church house. I watched the tears fill up wrinkles on his face. Said they used to come from miles around, and the sweetest spirit could be found. Oh, but lately it's been such
Randy's
lonely
Yeah, we gotta go take our phone to work. Look at Jody Look at those. Did you show Josie? Show Josie your nails.
some days Thursday I think I'm putting it in.
Josie's got pretty nail polish on too. We're such girls. I know. It's fun being a girl. Those are colorful and fun.
It's usually just go out for a couple hours. Because I want to take advantage of it. I know Harry wants to go to the nap, like, switching things
Oh, they're cool. I'll have my granddaughter do mine. So they look pretty like yours. Brennan.
Yeah.
Brennan.
Well, then we'll go to the harness shop together.
Give me a new belt. You gotta leave it.
Okay, so love you too. Very much.
Yeah, that's cool. You know, there's when you're talking about this kid, stop and think about that. It's almost like they did a trick out in the yard with the little herself.
Yeah. They do. Very good.
And now you that makes there's people that if you can figure that out,
I'll tell you, and I think he'll agree with me. Yeah.
You know, and there's no.
I remember those kids,
Oh, yeah, we used to see it every Friday night.
when I was younger, I used to ice skate.
I've never done that.
Yeah, because what happens when
Pretty
you're,
good ice skate.
I think that'd be hard to do. It hasn't been hard to do.
I think roller skating is.
Yeah. It's fun now.
can't be mom and dad, something's gonna break this.
Usually that's what used to. I skate all day. We got frostbite.
I tell you, what we eat, I tell you, what I tell you, you know, it's like that's.
Yeah, that's your babysitter, that's everything.
Good goals.
Yeah. That's where like, I said, I'm actually serious.
It's not bad.
Entertaining getting rid of the kids.
No, yeah.
They're down to the house. School comes in, they have to.
Should have right. All you had to do was make a phone call. Tell them. He's. I'll let you know. He knew the rest. Yes. Talk about bad parents.
My kid, and that's where I'm sitting there saying,
You got a funny story to tell.
that TV brings into this house. Someday now.
You know, I didn't know.
The biggest thing I need is
This
money. And I'm coming to that decision.
Well, that's what.
Boy's friends.
It's like $7 a month. You wanna watch
And I
it?
had that, and I ended up watching TV series.
See you later.
Well, you can do that for free with that. It's free. You know, not everything. I mean, you pay for it. You know? I was watching some, what was it, like they were on a, like a PT boat type thing from Australia. It's a series. I got hooked on it.
Then I can't get it.
What is it?
I can't get no work done. See you later.
It's an old car that he made into a hot rod. So it's pretty neat. And then I said, what about Chris, their son? And they were going to a show in Hawaii.
Bye, love you.
And she asked me, she said, oh,
Yeah, we got
big car show. She
good work.
So we